things, reforming the culture of the episcopate is probably going to require modifying the way bishops are chosen.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, consider this. If the process now in place works, if it works as it's designed, if it works without kinks, the last man to know who the bishop is the bishop himself. Right? Theoretically, the man under consideration never knows that he's under consideration until the nuncio's on the phone saying, the Holy Father would like you to be the Bishop of Pleasantville.
Theoretically, yes.
Right. Do you accept? Right? And we hear these stories every time a new bishop is introduced.
Yes.
I was cutting the grass and the phone rang, and it was the nuncio, and I was so surprised. Is that a way to choose the pastors of the church? I don't think so.
No.
Even if we kept the current process exactly as it is, two simple changes, I think, would yield fundamentally different results. Number one, every province in the church, a metropolitan and suffragan bishops associated with him, are asked to send the nuncio regular updates of priests they think should be considered for the episcopate. So it's an ongoing conversation. We keep these names up to date so the nuncio knows who should be considered when there's a need. I would suggest that when the nuncio gets that list, he should send a letter to the men in question, and to each man, to each priest whose name has been submitted for this purpose, he should ask this question, having in mind only the good of the church, the danger of scandal, and the salvation of your soul. Do you consent or not to be considered for the episcopate? And if the man writes back and says, no, I do not consent, that's it.
Yes.
Moves forward, he's not brought up again, just let it go. If he says yes, then he knows his life is under scrutiny, and he may or may not ever be asked to say yes, but he's consented at least.
Mm-hmm.
Second change.
And would that be made public?
Well, that's the second change.
Okay.
This is more radical. At regular intervals, twice a year, 3 times a year maybe, if the nuncio posted a list and said, the following priests have been recommended by their own bishops for consideration, possibly, of one day becoming bishops, and have consented to allow this consideration. If you have anything to say about any of the men on this list, positive or negative, please write to the nuncio with your information. Now, not only has the man consented, but everybody knows the people on this list are serious candidates, possibly, for the episcopate. Never saying this one is being considered for Chicago or that one for Phoenix or the third one for Minneapolis, but just in general, these are the priests who might one day be bishops. Tell us what you think of them. If those two changes were made, and otherwise the process works exactly as it now does, my hunch is there would be significant difference in the way, in the kinds of men who are chosen for the office. And it would be a process much more likely to identify the best candidates.
Yeah. So you're not allowing the laity to vote, but you're allowing the laity to help vet. And you're allowing the priests to vet themselves. Because I can imagine, you know, you're Monsignor so-and-so, and then one day you get a call and it says, Pope Francis wants you to be the bishop of blank. I mean, what do you say? No. I mean, are you going to say no? The Pope just asked you to do it. You're going to say yes, even if you're like, well, I do have a couple skeletons in my closet. Maybe no one will ever find out. Right? But if you're told 2 years ahead of time and you have time to think about it, you'd be like, no, you know, I shouldn't go in on this. You know, I don't need to be a bishop.
Let me give you a real world example of this. Keith Simons was a priest in Florida who became the bishop of West Palm Beach. I think he was an Orlando priest. So one day, Father Simons gets a call, will you be the bishop of West Palm Beach? And he says yes. Well, it turned out that earlier in his priesthood, he had molested several teenage boys. Now, he should never have accepted election to the episcopate. He should have said no. But let's say, for the sake of argument, he doesn't know that he's under consideration until he gets this phone call from the nuncio. And as you say, how do you say no? The Pope wants you to be, well, and we need an answer now. Well, okay. So he goes to be the Bishop of West Palm Beach. 2002, the Boston Globe reports begin in January. The scandal of priestly sex abuse becomes a national story. Well, it turns out, before that, Keith Simons was exposed and resigned in disgrace as the Bishop of West Palm Beach and disappeared from sight. The nuncio called the Bishop of Knoxville, Tennessee, Anthony O'Connell, to be the successor of Keith Simons in Palm Beach, Florida. Now, O'Connell was the founding bishop of the Diocese of Knoxville, and by all accounts, a very fine founding bishop. He created the diocese ex nihilo. He attracted a great number of seminarians. There was energy and positive direction of the diocese. He was well respected. He was from Missouri originally. I think he was a priest of Springfield, Cape Girardeau. So he gets a call from the nuncio. We'd like you to replace the disgraced child-abusing Bishop of West Palm Beach. And he says yes. Only problem is, earlier in his life, back in Missouri, when he was the rector of a high school seminary, he did the same thing. Now, if you're the man who gets the phone call and you know this about yourself, and you know whom you're replacing and why he's no longer the bishop, in the name of God, how do you say yes? And yet he did. So in March of 2002, there's a news conference in West Palm Beach. Antonio O'Connell stands at the microphone to confess his sins and announce his resignation. The second consecutive child molesting bishop in that diocese to do so. The question is, how did two men, both of whom knew their own personal histories, accept the invitation to become bishops? And how did the second one accept the invitation to replace a child molester when he knew about his own history? That's just inconceivable. I don't know how to explain it. I'm not sure that the surprise phone call from the nuncio can account for it. But certainly, if in the new circumstances, in the new normal, if a man is asked before consideration ever begins, do you consent to be considered? Knowing what he knows about his own personal history, at least he has the liberty to say, no, do not even consider me, to avoid being placed in the situation where, whether from a misplaced sense of obedience, he has to say yes, or irresistible personal ambition, or whatever it is that might drive him, despite his knowledge of his own past, to say yes. If he gets the invitation to say yes or no, shall you be considered, at least then he can say no.
Yes.
And if the names are published, then anybody with knowledge can write to the nuncio and say, yes, he'd make a great bishop, or no, not really, and here's why.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a public vetting. And we do that in the sacrament of holy matrimony.
Of course we do. That's marriage.
We publish the banns. And I don't know what the current rules are. I know at my parish they publish the banns. And it's basically Joe is going to marry Sally. And if there's anything that would be obstructing this union, please let...
forever hold your peace.
And then there's the liturgical, yeah. So if we're doing that for holy matrimony, why not the holy priesthood in the episcopate? It just makes sense.
We do it in a way for all deacons and priests because it takes years of preparation. It's all public. You are scrutinized by multiple people, priests and laity alike, probed, potted, tested. You've really got to want it, and you've got to go through that process a long time before your ordination. For a bishop, there's the phone call, yes or no. And theoretically, there is a vetting process. The nuncio can write to select people, priests and laity alike, with a letter that asks if there's anything you'd like us to know, any reason this man shouldn't be a bishop, please write in confidence. And it's all under what's called pontifical secret, which is the highest level of secrecy. It's sinful if you break the secret and tell anybody that you got this letter or what you answer. We used to joke in Rome, pontifical secret means everybody knows except the pontiff. It's observed in the breach more than verse. But my question is, does it really have to be secret? What in the process demands secrecy?
The other problem is if it's all done in secrecy by a few in the congregation of bishops, and you do get corruption in that congregation, you now have the virus, the illness, the plague going to Japan, going to the Philippines, going to Vietnam, going to Argentina, going to Chile, going to Mexico, going to America. If there's corrupt people choosing the bishops, it's now a ground zero and it's spreading it faster than ever.
Which is why in this present crisis, with the scandal surrounding Ted McCarrick and the dioceses in Pennsylvania, the laity are rightly saying this cannot be investigated only by bishops. We must be involved. And they're correct. The bishops have demonstrated they are not capable of policing this matter themselves. Light is the best disinfectant, and the more people who know, the better.
Yep.
So law enforcement officials, attorneys, prosecutors particularly, anyone who understands the law and how to purify a corrupt organization needs to be involved in this process.